Hey,
Hello, hello, hello.
hey, how are
How
you?
I am well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired, but
Are
I'm
you?
good. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a little faking it with the well today, but
Mm.
I don't want to go fully into it, so I'm going to stick with the well.
Yeah. And genuinely, I feel like every week that we've ever asked, there's always been stuff. And I'm also always well, because I'm healthy enough to be here with you and do a podcast. And we're women connected, crossing generations and race and everything. So there's always, not just between us, but in general, so much good stuff going on. But we can be
Right,
honest, yeah, life is a lot and it's
right.
multidimensional. So,
And there's
yeah,
a lot swirling in the world right now.
yeah,
Just a
there is.
lot here in
Hmm.
Georgia, especially. So, should we do our official introduction and get this show started?
Absolutely. Hi, I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of ShealoGlo LLC, a handmade shea butter company. I am your advocate for natural self-care and your practical business systems.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And we love to get together every week to have intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. How do we do all this and keep our sanity as part of it, right?
Yes, because sanity's got to stay. Yes.
Well, today we're talking about intellectual wellness, which I always love. It is one, I have to be honest, it is one of those when we're going through the eight, like when we're listing off the eight wellness, sometimes it's one that I forget. And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, wait, this is important,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
And I know it's one of your favorite, my
It is.
friends, who you and I are both avid readers. And so I know it's,
Yes. I mean, if and I think I talk about this all the time. If I were to take away all the knowledge that I know from books, where would I be? Especially I just told everybody, right? I'm a Black millennial business owner. How did that happen? I definitely had to read a few books and learn a few things and have conversations. So I love it because it's added so much to my life. Absolutely.
it's also something I don't take for granted, which we're going to
Right.
share with our listeners in a few minutes the actual definition that we work off of.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when I think about intellectual illness, I think about school, and it can be
Mm.
so much more. But in my lineage, I've been researching more on ancestor.com and all that.
Yeah.
I come from farmers and sharecroppers, and I come from a lot of folks who have a second grade education because they
Mm.
had to come home to work on the farm. And so I always knew that from my grandparents because they came home from the Great Depression to work on the
Hmm.
farm, from school. But as I look back on multiple generations, it's like, whoa, like, oh, in the census, she had a second grade education. She had a fourth grade education. She had a,
Hmm.
it's, and it was also why education was so important to my grandparents,
Yeah.
like for their children and their children's children.
Hmm.
Now, that being said, my papa, this is my paternal grandfather, was the smartest man I ever knew, one of the kindest and one of the smartest. He built a house from the ground up, did all the electric, this was back before permits, right?
Yeah.
We always laughed because he built a beautiful log cabin for my grandmother, but all the electric was upside down. So in his house, instead of turning it on, you turned it down to turn it
Hey,
on. But
it works.
I mean, the
That's
man
good.
had, I believe he had a third grade education.
Hmm.
Like, so what's the official definition of intellectual wellness? What are we working on today?
Yeah, so intellectual wellness refers to active participation in scholastic, cultural, and community activities. It is important to gain and maintain intellectual wellness because it expands knowledge and skills in order to live a stimulating, successful life. In order to improve intellectual wellness, it is important to value creativity, curiosity, and lifelong learning. And this definition is specifically from the University of Illinois.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lifelong learning, right?
Yes.
We'll ask our guests when they come up in a minute, but what are you currently reading? Because I know you
Oh,
always have a book that you're
yes.
reading.
Yes, I'm reading. So I would say two things I'm reading. Still, what is it, Lord? The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Okay, I know effective people finish things. So my goal for November, my book goal is to finish this book since I've been reading it since last year. I started the B 2.0 that you gave me, but I told you I don't want to dig too deep into that book until I finish. So technically, those are the two that I'm reading. And I'm also listening to an audiobook when I'm in the car that's titled Lies My Teacher Told Me.
All right.
Yes.
Big stuff.
Yes. What about
Big
you? What are you reading right now?
I was looking because you know how I laughed because I read on my phone.
Hmm.
I listen to Audible. I was
Hmm.
like, which? So I always have a series of fiction going. That's how I
Okay.
escape. Like I always have
Hmm.
a series of just 15-minute where I fall asleep.
I like
I
that.
pre-ordered Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
Oh,
One of the ones that pops up first on my book is Emergent Strategy, but I pop back in and out of that book. I wouldn't say I'm reading it, straight out. I just listened to the Essentialist book. We talked about that recently.
I think we did.
Um,
Yeah.
I would have to pull up Audible to tell you the latest one. I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately.
Mm.
So there is a new podcast about Indigenous wisdom that I've been listening to that I'll put in the show notes. Because I've been taking a class with the Southern Movement Assembly and about decolonization. And
Okay.
so they recommended this podcast. And so it's new. I'm listening versus reading with
Right.
but hey, as podcast host, I'm like, whoop, whoop, we can
Yeah.
support that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I find out how many books CEOs read every year, I said, you know what? Let me start listening to audiobooks because
Right?
sometimes reading the physical pages is not going to get fit into the schedule.
I don't know if the statistic is still true or not, and our
Mm.
guest might be able to tell us, but I read somewhere years ago that if you read 15 minutes a day on your subject, you would be an expert. It was either within a year or 2 years and have
Hmm.
read more than most people who work in that field.
Hmm.
And so I thought, oh, that's fascinating, right? So
Yeah.
just 15 minutes a day, like it doesn't have to be hours. And
Mm-mm.
now that we have podcasts, now that we have Audible books, now that we have different ways to do it, I mean, yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I think we should bring up our guest. Were you about to say something
Absolutely.
else?
I will say it after we're all at the table.
All right, awesome. Well, y'all know I love introducing guests, and I especially love introducing guests who I consider personal friends also. And today's guest is one of those. So, Gwendolyn Wende Ballew is the artistic and administrative leader of Reforming Arts. They founded Reforming Arts in 2010 as an arts and humanities education program for people incarcerated in women's prisons in Georgia. This name is going to sound familiar to y'all because I've shouted out Reforming Arts a lot on this show. Wende has taught at Kennesaw State University and continues to teach and direct Reforming Arts classes inside and outside of women's prisons facilities in Georgia. And they facilitate Reforming Arts Theater Reentry Project. Wende is a co-founder of the Georgia Coalition of Higher Education in Prison and the Southern Higher Education in Prison Collective. Wende has a bachelor's degree in theater, an MBA, a master's in American Studies, a graduate certificate in women's studies, and is a PhD candidate in qualitative research and evaluation methodologies at the University of Georgia. Perfect candidate for talking about intellectual wellness with us today. In 2018, Wende was named a woman making a mark by Atlanta Magazine and a woman to watch by Weight Watchers Magazine. In 2019, the Arts Exchange awarded Wende and Reforming Arts with an Elon Dooley Arts and Social Justice Champion Award. I am so excited to invite to our podcast today my friend Wende Ballew. Hello, hello.
Hey y'all.
How are you
Hey.
today?
I'm pretty good. I got a
Awesome.
headache, but I'm getting used to that.
Oh,
Yeah. How much water have you had? Every time somebody says something, I said that's my first question.
Good bit. I'm just sensitive to light, and so I've been on the screen a lot today.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, the last 2 years is hard for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, Wende Ballew, thank you for coming on and talking to us about intellectual wisdom and wellness today. I specifically wanted you to come on because, first of all, I adore you and I adore performing arts and the work that we are doing in the world. But talk to us about your dissertation and what you're currently working on and the juiciness of what you are creating in the world right now.
Okay. Well, it's been a long journey. I started working towards I'm writing a curriculum and a pedagogy. And I started that as part of my women's or my American Studies program at Kennesaw 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something long time ago. And then actually, when I started at UGA and PhD program, I was in the lifelong learning program, and that kind of switched to workforce learning, which I was like, I considered that to be kind of like organizational behavior, which I could have gotten a PhD from the School of Business and gotten paid more for. So I kind of switched programs. The American Studies, it's funny because the American Studies program was brand new when I was the first cohort, and the same thing happened at UGA. They announced this new PhD program. I was in the first cohort, but I've taken so long that I was not the first graduate from that program. But so what we're working on is kind of looking at critical pedagogy, which was specifically Pedagogy of the Oppressed, really, by Paulo Freire, and he wrote that it came out in the United States, I think, in 1970. And then Augusto Boal followed that up with Theater of the Oppressed, and he did designed a lot of, didn't design, like everybody steals theater exercises from everybody else, right? You just recycle them, but he wrote them in a way to really talk about doing theater, not for the spectators, for the average people in Brazil, to talk to do consciousness raising with them and to prepare them for action. And he says that theater is not revolution, but it is rehearsal for revolution. And so I've taken those mostly and read them through, or what I call diffract them through, Karen Barad's reading of quantum entanglement, and she's a science theorist and a feminist. And also, so she really looked at diffracting Judith Butler's concept of gender performativity, and then she read that as queer performativity and talks about the queerness of performativity. So performativity is very central to a lot of my argument, and works really well when you're using theater as your main research method, which I do. It's called theater action research, and that was written by I learned about it from James B. Thompson from the UK, and he's a theater practitioner, I think, in Manchester. So we've just been doing all kinds of writing shows. I've been observing for over a decade, and now we're really getting close to this pedagogy, which we're calling right now creative intraactive pedagogy / research / theater. Doesn't really feel like I do it all at the same time, and it's all entangled together.
So, Wende, for a layperson who's listening, who might be saying, "What the heck is pedagogy?"
Right.
Can you break that down for our listeners?
It's the study of teaching. How do we teach? How do we know what? And then, I also go into a lot of epistemology, is like, how do we know what we know? And then ontology, which is, the practice of being, and so I really feel like creative, interactive pedagogy is not just it's all of those things at the same time.
So give us an example. I know because I've played in some of these classes with you as a volunteer for Reforming Arts, but what are some of the things you do with folks who are reentering society or who are currently incarcerated in Georgia?
Well, let me say, again, the goal of like a lot of applied theater that you're taking into the community is, again, to our language around it has typically been about, getting people in their bodies or getting people comfortable and getting to know ourselves, getting to know each other, getting, and becoming more observant, and then consciousness raising, and then taking action, right? Sometimes the taking action part gets left out, but and taking theater from as something designed to control people, and to something that helps people be liberated. One of the things that Reforming Arts does is we believe in narrative control. So a lot of programs that do this type of theater, they say no pen to paper, right? It's all improv. And even to the point of when the night of if you have an audience, it's still just improv. Well, we did that for several years, and then we stopped doing it, and we started inviting creative writers, and we started putting Comp 1 and 2 in our programs and poetry in our program. And in that sense, so that we give people the tools to tell their own stories, right? We help them become better writers, better storytellers in order to tell their own stories, not just within our class, but when they are released and they have to fill out a job application and they have to go to a job interview, and they get these terrible questions of, oh, I see there's a gap, or I see, what happened. And so they can, because, people that have been incarcerated, and a lot of people will, well, what happened was, and I'm like, okay, so that's the way you start a lie, and so how do we give people to say things, and so that other people will have confidence in our response and not be suspicious of our response. So the 4 tenets of our pedagogy are intraaction, and that again is getting to know ourselves, getting comfortable in our bodies. We've spent a lot of time on exercises that I don't quite know how to teach virtually, about the trust exercises, and that is most of that is getting people to close their eyes and trust somebody else in the room. And which is very difficult. It's very difficult for me. I model it. I do an exercise where we have to run across the room with our eyes closed, and the people will stop us and keep us from being harmed. And I always start with that because it scares me so bad that I keep going, but I inevitably slow down and start cussing very loudly in the middle of it. And then, of course, they think that's hilarious, but it also displays that I've been through trauma too. I don't trust either, but I'm doing this anyway, right? I'm leaning into it and doing something that scares the hell out of me. And, mostly I might know 1 or 2 of the people in the room, but mostly the people that I don't know, right? So then we go to, let me pull it up, my cheat sheet, say it right. Then we go to post-human play. And I actually developed this through observing Christine in her work at Mercy Care, and watch just how certain exercises get people into this mode of play. And And when I think of a mode of play, it's a way of being, and that we just really understanding. We talked a little bit about this before, about how different it is teaching in a prison, how people, are such in their scarcity modes and things like that. So you have to get them into this mode of play where they are able to separate themselves from all of the stresses that's going on around them so that they're able to learn. And I really believe that everybody, that we are more able to enter into discussions and conversations with a sense of understanding if we first go into a mode of play.
Can I add something in here, Wendy?
Yes.
So, as a volunteer for Reforming Arts, I've done interplay in the women's prison system in Georgia. And every time you start talking about that, I think about this one person who we were doing an exercise and getting into that mode of play. And when we took a moment afterwards to notice, and we were in medium to maximum security prison, they were a person with a life sentence, like one of the most restrictive environments you can be in. And we got into a mode of play. And when they noticed what they were feeling in their body, they were feeling freedom.
Yeah.
And when I think about the power of that, like it makes me want to cry, because it's like, this is powerful work.
Yeah.
And it's play. I mean, it's intellectual, but it's play. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just think about that.
It is, and it's that connection, right? Where we have this, that's the thing that the cognito did to us all, that, and then we just keep regurgitating these knowledges of these old white Roman and Greek men, and that believed that it was okay for some humans to own other humans. Like whatever else they wrote, they believed that. And we keep regurgitating it and repackaging it and calling it the dialectic, or calling it like the but anyway, we've got to get away from that. And the core of our pedagogy is about fostering an ethic of care. And I look at that ethic of care as not as a binary against with justice, but as it needs to be our central ethic of caring for each other. Now, that's going to be displayed, and I'm not a nurturing person. Don't call me if you've got the flu. Right?
I'm calling you, and I want you to make me some homemade soup from stuff out of your garden. Just saying.
Well, that's my type of nurturing, right? I'll make you that. I'll pick the vegetables and I'll cook it and I'll bring it to you, but don't ask me to bring it to you, then you have to get out of bed and come get it and put it in your bowl. But, I am a very caring person, and trying to talk about how we care about each other, or, quite frankly, the last 2 years have just broken my heart, as Christine well knows. I mean, I am heartbroken over people's response and their selfishness. And I know a lot of it is founded in fear, but it's broken my heart. I mean, and so then let's transition. Let's go on to the fourth tenet, which is diffraction, that in other people's thing that would be called analysis. And one of the things, and one of the critiques I've had, is that with theater is so embodied, you're using your body, you're bringing in a little bit, they talk a little bit about spirit, but it's really, talking about our body knowledge. But then we'll do exercises. And for the longest time, I would follow that up with, or you do a whole play. And then, and then it's about the talk back and people, talking about what they saw or whatever. But again, interplay, and Christine did me a huge favor by just coming in one day and saying, well, what'd you notice? And instead of taking that exercise that we'd just done and talking intellectually about what we thought, or that it was about communication, or it's about this, or about everything, whatever, then we started talking about what we noticed in our bodies first. And it is a simple thing, but it is a profound shift. It is a profound shift in how we think and how we learn and how we teach.
And I would add on to that, especially with folks who've been in trauma, because, you know, they don't want to be in their bodies. I mean, understandably so, because a lot of times it's painful and it's scary and it's hard, you know, it's a survival mechanism to zip out of your body or not paying attention to what's going on in your body. So yeah, yes, I want to affirm that. Shannon, you look like you have a question or a comment.
Yeah, and I would say it depends on what type of trauma it is, you know, especially me being a young woman who does have a bachelor's degree, who had the opportunity to do that. I'm thinking about what you're talking about, Wendy, and learning and being mobile physically, and the difference of me being in the front of my classroom taking notes. That takes my hand, some neck movements, and my brain, you know. So as a woman, especially getting older and thinking about femininity and what I want it to look like, to me, it's been interesting to think about my body a little bit more and not just my brain, because everything's been, it's either I'm working and I'm physically walking around the building, or I'm using my brain to think about something and to learn a new skill or whatever that looks like, whether it's me reading a book or listening to a book. Those are usually the variations that I think about. I don't think about if I've danced today or if I've played and what that looks like, and the combining of the two. That's what I love about interplay and everything that you guys talk about.
Right. And so, you know, I'm going to add here too, like, people assume I do this and all of this is intuitive to me, right?
Right.
Christine's already laughing. I hate it all. I resist. I live in my head. My brain is big and it likes to learn and it's where I feel comfortable. And yet I majored in theater as a stage manager and technical director, right? Like, you know, and so all of this has been uncomfortable for me from the very beginning, but the evidence, like Brene Brown says, you know, she talks a lot about how all this vulnerability and stuff makes her so uncomfortable. It makes me so incredibly uncomfortable. And that is that's a big aspect of our classes, is that encouraging people to become vulnerable so that they can build resilience. Makes me so uncomfortable, but it's essential in healing. And that is our kind of pivot right now with Reforming the Arts. Our last tenet is creative becoming. And that I say that instead of like revolution or action or transformation, because I've never seen a human go through an actual metamorphosis where they go from a worm to a caterpillar. So transformation kind of alludes to a utopia, and there is no utopia. Each time we make some progress, that we've just shined light on new problems that we weren't able to see before. But if we're, you know, come together in this creative becoming of trying to create something new together, then that's a change and that's a shift. And you can't define it for everybody. It won't be the same for everybody involved. And then I also say that as I've learned more about trauma, we want to be so much more conscious and focused on helping people, using this pedagogy to help people heal from trauma.
Right. I love that, Wendy. Thank you for that work. I mean, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it in action. I've witnessed the changes. It's not always easy. I mean, you saying that about it's uncomfortable, or it's like, yeah. I mean, and to your point about sometimes it takes uncomfortability to build that resilience. If everything feels good, we talk about this when we talk about anti-racist work and when we talk about social justice. If it all feels good, you're probably not doing it the right way. My God. This is hard work. It's meaningful and it's important, but it's not always easy. And holding both at the same time, we can do it with play. We can do it with dancing. We can do it with joy. We can do it with, with laughter, even on big, scary subjects.
And
So,
I would say it's not I think that before I was here, had certain paradigm shifts, right? I would think that that sounds like you were making it unrealistically optimistic, or I feel like some people think that's the fluff in it, but no, it is absolutely necessary to laugh, because all this other stuff is going to happen. If you don't laugh as well as get upset at the things that you should have get upset at, then there isn't the equal sides, or maybe both sides of the coin. I won't call them equal, however you would think about it, but you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, you have to laugh. I think that playing, for me, it reminds me of keeping that childlike spirit, right? Some of it is serious. Absolutely. I should pay my sales tax for my business before the end of the month. We know that should be taken care of. But I can also go roll down a hill with some grass on it and relax a little bit, because it's a lot. And sometimes we don't have to hold the weight of it. We can just live our lives and enjoy that moment. And then when it's time to work and you have that time block in your schedule, now it's time to give the effort, where it should go. But absolutely, that's why I love learning more about the play, because I usually didn't think about it. I'm thinking about my grades and everything else that went into that formula for me when I was in school.
Wendy, we were talking before the show about a lesson that you had learned in regard to dancing it in. Do you want to share about that? Do you remember?
Yes. I was like, what do we say? Yes. So, one of the things I was saying is like, I tend to, well, for many years, our primary, our performing arts was place based, and we taught in women's prisons and also had a reentry program. We still have the reentry program, and we're still able to teach in the prisons. But that's a very stressful, and usually I would get, when I arrived at a prison, I'd get there about 7:30 and leave about 4 p.m. And it's very stressful. Getting in, it's dehumanizing even for the volunteers to go into a prison. And so I would, again, I'm running a not-for-profit. I have too many dogs. I'm been in some type of graduate program most of my adult life. And so I'm like, well, this is a good time for me to listen to an article or something like that. So I would just be in my head the whole time, or I'd be thinking about, this staff person that I really, really don't like, or that has really caused me a lot of trauma. And then I went in stressed, start the day stressed. I go into a stressful situation already tense, right? And so what I was saying was that in the future, what I'm going to do is have a playlist of things that are, really bring me joy for at least that last 30 minutes before I enter such a tense situation. I really feel like I've made a lot of mistakes around that before, but I hope I am able to change my practice, because, as y'all know, just because you know better doesn't necessarily mean you do better. But
Right? That's such a good point. So, Wendy, what would be one song that would be on that playlist? I want us to all go around and say a song that would be on our playlist that would bring us joy, or that we'd want to. What do you think?
I think one of my, I don't know if I've told you this, Christine, one of my favorite songs right now, and over the summer, I just was camping and by myself, and I just played Hallelujah by Brandy Carlisle over and over again. And I'm a mimic. My type of acting, I mimic, right? And so I listened to that, and I pulled up the lyrics, and I mimicked her.
Mm.
And she sings that with such emotion, like, and again, not necessarily joy, but it just brought out all those emotions that needed to come out. And so I now, when I'm like, no, really, I need to focus and I need to get this out, I just play that song and I sing it with her. I mean, and I really belt it out with her. And that puts me in that.
I love that. Shannon, what about you? What's one song that would be on that playlist?
I would say "Don't Worry About a Thing" by Stevie Wonder, because I speak Spanish, not fluently yet, but at the beginning of the song, we're like, wait, he really just made something up, but it's Stevie Wonder, so he put it in a song. He's like, "Hey, sugar, you understand any of that?" And she's like, knowing that she don't understand anything he just said, and I think it's just playful. They're dancing, and then it's like me getting my tempo up, especially since I used to be in band. But it's funny, Farrell said something about here goes Shannon doing her scales. And I said, you know what? That's actually a really good point. So I do have a playlist that like gets me in tune with positivity. There's hope. It's gonna be okay. Don't worry about anything. We can have fun and get stuff done too. What's your song?
I love this, y'all, because I use it with myself and I use it with my private clients, my coaching clients. Is like music can shift us. Like it can be a 30-minute playlist. It can be one song you can put on. So many. But, one of my faves is Resilient by Rising Appalachia. Like it is, if I need a You Got This song, I'll put that on. Karen Drucker is one of my favorites who I just belt out with and I use to shift my energy. But talking about Don't Worry About a Thing, I don't know if we've talked about this on air before, but I'm a little bit addicted to watching The Voice. I don't so here, I know Wendy's like, what? This is a new development. This is a new development from the pandemic. And I'm not a reality TV girl unless it comes to things that watching people make their dreams come true. Like I love witnessing that. Well, they were singing. I can't remember who was singing it the other night. Stevie Wonder's "Don't Worry About a Thing." But I also wanted to tell Wendy, because Wendy's on this part of town. One of the contestants is from East Point, Georgia. And he's like one of the top 11. And I'm just like, whoop, represent Atlanta, represented. So yes to music and yes to creating our playlist. And I would love any of our listeners out there to give us a shout out and put it in the comments or put it on our social media. Like, what's on your playlist? What is your go-to for shifting your energy and bringing joy?
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's important. Yeah.
Well, what's on, finding out what's on other people's playlists. Cause like I say, on that same trip, I had created a playlist called Mountain Healing. And I put a lot of Brandi Carlile on it and things like that. But I also chant, Christine knows this because I've told her that I was like, okay, let me search for some Christine music now, because she's all about positivity and stuff. So I kind of hate that, but I kind of need to hear it right now. So.
Yeah, that's why we're connected. Yeah, sometimes you got to do something you wouldn't normally do to get out of it.
Right. Well, the other thing, one of my favorite tricks is the free app Shazam. That if you don't have it on your phone, I highly recommend it. It's a free app that you can just press your button and say Shazam, and it will tell you the song that's playing. Because I can't tell you how many times like I've been going through a drive-through, or you're hearing music, or even somebody playing music in the car next to me, right? And they're playing it loud, and I'm like, ooh, I like that. But I don't know what it is. So if I hit Shazam, it will capture the music for me, and then I can put it into my playlist. Yeah. So as a leader of Interplay and somebody that teaches a lot of classes, it's an incredible tool. But I recommend it to everybody, because then you just build, and then I have certain playlists designated for, I found that out in the world. But now, Wendy, I know that the pandemic has been devastating on the women in prison in Georgia and really all across the nation. Is there anything that our listeners can do? Like, as we talked last week about calling our legislatures, we promote action items around here. So is there anything that we can do in support of women who are currently incarcerated?
Yeah, we're so disconnected right now. We're keeping in touch with the Department of Corrections, but since we're still considered volunteers, we can't have interaction with our former or our students.
Right.
And so I don't even know what, yes, constantly call legislators, the governor's office, things like that to encourage, testing, because they're, as far as I know, they're still not doing regular testing. The governor refuses to mandate the vaccine. And it, yes, most people there have committed crimes. They're serving their sentence. But just as we see, like the masking, not masking, like all of these things put people are such enraged about it right now. And any of those things, anything that you are seeing as an increased anger or as an increased whatever in society, everything that is in society is in prison, but it is hyper. So whatever tensions you're seeing amongst your family or whatever, it is 100% guaranteed that it is also happening in a prison, and it is 1,000 times worse.
Woo! I think about that when you say that, when, we're getting ready for holiday celebrations in the next couple of weeks. And I know there's a lot of conversation around, having to be with family or choosing to be with family or not. And you saying that, what just popped into my head was, imagine if we were all locked in with our families with no choice for weeks on it. Like, I think about that. I don't know why that just popped up in my head, but I'm like, whoa, yeah, that would be magnified. That would be, we were talking about family gatherings coming up, Shannon, and just big energy right now. Big energy around all this.
Well, I want to say too, one of the things about knowledge, and this whole thing for me, this journey has been about understanding, gaining more understanding, and realizing, mostly trying to understand my parents more, which they are unusual people. And one of the things that I really regretted during this whole thing was, so my father's in prison. He's been in prison for 35 years. He's at Huntsville State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. And at one point last year, that prison, Houston, it's just outside of Houston, in Huntsville, they had all these COVID cases. They are testing in the facility where he is, but they also had 2 weeks of no electricity or water. And I'm sure there were people calling out, how's my loved one? How's my loved one? And they were being told something that I know is absolutely not true. In those 2 weeks, I regretted all of the understanding that I have about how the criminal justice system really works. It was very difficult for me to know he was living through that, and that there was no way I was going to get the truth of what was actually going on.
Well, and when we talk about trauma and we talk about basic needs, and 2 weeks without water or lights in a lockdown situation, and yeah, and Huntsville has some of the worst reputation in the nation for their carceral control. That's the state I'm from, and actually have relatives working in that prison. It is just small world, right? It is so much.
So we just have to keep taking our deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just make sure I don't regret all of that I've learned, but what are we spending our time on? Regurgitating, or are we, trying to, find new ways or create new ways of living together and understanding? I don't know what the answer is. I don't think we've created it yet, but
Well, and I think of even having the intention to learn, right? If you haven't been exposed to the criminal justice system, if you believe a lot of the lies that are out there about it's only horrible people that are put in jail, like educate yourself about, yes, there are a lot of people that have committed crimes, and why, and where did that come from, and were their basic needs not met? Like, it's such a complex system that for me bears more understanding and knowledge, like learning about it.
Well, this kind of ties into something we were saying before, was that, again, we're Reforming Arts is pivoting towards, helping people recover from trauma. And I'm actually, in January, I'm enrolled to start in a certificate program for trauma healers. And I've worked through a lot of my own complex PTSD because of my childhood and because of some of the things that happened to me as a volunteer in prisons. But I was saying that one of the things that are most profound learning for me over the last few years was, many years ago, I sat through a psychologist talking at a ending mass incarceration conference in Mississippi. And he was talking about criminal behavior and how people with criminal mindsets respond to altercations and things like that. And then more recently, I was listening to these books on trauma. I think it was Serene Jones, who is president of Union Theological Seminary. In her book, Grace and Trauma, was talking about, detailing how a person reacts and when they're in a cycle of trauma. And it was the exact same thing, y'all. Like, like intellectually or up here somewhere, I've known that all of these people have been traumatized, that they're all in trauma, but it is, and it's intentional. Like, people are intentionally allowing some people to live in such risky and precarious situations that they inevitably become traumatized, and then they're easier to control.
Whew. We could have a whole nother show about that. And we should have you back, Wendy, after next year going through this program. And Shannon, did you have any comments or questions before we wrap this section?
No. I think about, well, I guess I do have a comment. It reminds me of this paper I wrote when I was in college, the disproportionate incarceration of Black men, and it was so interesting. I was watching something the other day, and this gentleman was talking about how he got brought into the cell, and it was like the biggest bird cage he had ever seen. And I had never thought about it like that, but I'm thinking about all these men and their families, and the women, definitely, of course, we're women connected in wisdom, so we got to talk about the women that are incarcerated too. And not to say that I'm not for accountability and this happens next. We have to have consequences. That's understandable. But like you said, Wendy, the dehumanizing part, like you said, Christine, how do we get there? The things that are set up, we have to deal with the root, or no matter what the programs are that we have or what we say or what we do, we are still part of the system that's perpetuating the end result that we're saying we don't want. So that's why I love your program so much, Wendy. I remember I was on the call, I think it was an anniversary. We were celebrating everything that you guys are doing at Reforming Arts. And I'm just thankful because I don't know if I have the emotional space for decades to go into the prison system and help women. I'm so thankful that there's a program like Reforming Arts and everything else that you're doing to help, because it's necessary.
Yeah, that was the 10-year anniversary program.
Yeah. 10 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Shannon, will you tell our listeners and Wendy what Wisdom in Action is about? And we will.
Yes. Absolutely. So like you said, we love to have action steps. So we talked about intellectual wisdom, went through a lot of different things. Wendy, what is your one thing this week that you're going to do to be intentional about your intellectual wisdom?
I'm reading a book called Radical Belonging by Lindo Bacon about body acceptance and their perspective from being gender nonconforming.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
So is it to finish the book, or is it to
Oh
continue
yeah,
reading
it's to finish that book and to just really keep thinking through that, because it's been such a gift to me to like hear similar, like you downplay, when you're trans, but you're not in either binary, you downplay that difference, but it's nice to be affirmed.
I hear you. Yeah. Okay. That's a great wisdom in action. Mine, Christine, I heard you ask me. Mine is, there's so many. Actually, you know what? We're talking about wellness and wisdom. Mine is to finish my goal for this week. And my goal for this week is to follow up with my goals for the last 2 weeks. So we are still in the month, so I'm still on track with everything. But just to tie up those loose ends, get on track with everything that I have to get done for the rest of November. And I think that'll put me in a good spot for my intellectual wellness. What about you?
I have some homework to do. I've been doing this arts equity for board members, and I've got some homework and reading to do around that. It's a anti-racist program, so I've got some reading, some listening. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly the names of it, but I'm also going to be listening to that podcast that I was talking about earlier, and I will put that in our show notes. So yeah, I'm going to keep on trucking. I think, 15 to 30 minutes a day is my wisdom in action for listening to something that besides my, I would say in addition to my fiction, because I can do fiction all day long, right? It's my escapism. But I'm going to say 15 to 30 minutes of different. And I love what you said, Wendy, about looking for authors that are not white males. Like, let's look for trans and women of color, and let's look for, lifting up voices that may have been oppressed. Because thank goodness with the new publishing and the new ways that people can get things to press, we have access in a way that we never had when I was growing up. So I'm really excited about it. Thank you, Wendy, for being here today. Thanks for this awesome conversation.
Yes.
I'm so grateful for you. So
yeah,
I'm going to put you back in the green room.
Thank you so much.
Such a powerful conversation.
Yeah.
When you think about that, what's the one thing that bubbles up for you, Shannon? That you're like, I want to learn more about that, or I want to know more about that?
If I had to pick one thing, one thing I really liked was the creative becoming. It's so true, and I think that for me it gives grace to who you were, who you are right now, and the fragile balance of whatever stance you're in life, and then what is to come and everything that you're working on becoming. So I really like the creative becoming. What does that look like for me? That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I love that part of their pedagogy. Yeah. And, I'm a huge advocate for the play. And whether it's the intra or the inter, like just bring on the play. And I think about the last 2 years, and I think about if I didn't have these processes, like if I didn't have interplay, if I didn't have ways to process things through my body. And I don't know that I'd be still standing, So I think they're important. And I encourage our listeners to, find something that works for them. And we're always going on about taking a deep breath and letting it out. But, deep breathing in these times is important, So
Absolutely.
What is happening over at ShealoGlo before we jump off this call? What are you up to in this holiday?
Goodness. So much. So markets, of course, I'm giving gifts to the city of Atlanta. That's what it feels like, right? Meeting people, teaching them how to take care of themselves. And it's so interesting because, Christine, I thought that I was going to have to learn how to sell, right? And be a better saleswoman. But really, it's not even the product. It's people not knowing how to take care of themselves. The fact that everybody's just okay with No, I don't do anything when I get out of the shower. And I didn't realize that it was such a big um, piece of what we miss on a daily basis. When we go through everything, we just forget about our bodies. Like our bodies isn't the vehicle that is taking us through this journey. So I am getting ready for my next market. I'm so excited. On Small Business Saturday, we're going to be out there with the American Express Black Saturday with Atlanta Indie Market. So it's been great being out there with Mike and Flex and everybody having a good time in the middle of the city. And it's really historical, you know, with people not working and everything that's been going on with COVID, to be, again, a young Black woman with my own business out in the city, helping families and individuals take care of themselves. I love it. I love it. And for everybody who is a listener for Women Connected in Wisdom, yes, you do have your own special discount code, the Wise5. And I'm going to talk to my business partner and see what he thinks about being able to bundle this with some of these sales that we have coming up. Let's see what I can do for you guys. But yes, we have the new sizes, the Travel and Glow kit. That's the 3 ounce. It'll pass through TSA. Okay, no questions asked. So you don't have to wait to buy product when you get there. You don't have to worry about throwing away your favorite item. I'll tell you this, Christine. One time I was traveling to Texas, right? Papa Do used to fly us out. We got flued out. Okay, like the young people say. So we got flued out to Texas, me and Dimitri, one of my co-managers. He was from Greece. And I had this big 10-ounce container of organic, unfiltered, whatever it is, unrefined coconut oil. Of course, it's not TSA approved. Into the trash it goes, right? And so our plane is late. We're chilling at the airport, and I'm just thinking about the fact that I could have checked my bag in. He's like, "You should really calm down. You can buy it when we get there." And I said, "Dimitri, they don't have 10-ounce containers of unrefined organic coconut oil at the airport." Okay, so we have the Travel and Glow kit, and then we have the Home Glow kit, which is the bigger size, the 8-ounce container, so you can share it with your family and not worry about them stealing it. So that is what I have
Well,
going on.
absolutely. Like I gave last year for Christmas, I gave my mom one of your kits, and she absolutely loved it. So I just want to give a shout out
I
if
don't think I
anybody's
knew that.
listening and you're thinking, yeah, we had it delivered to her. Yeah, she loved it. So she's always on the hunt for good lotion and good oil. And I was thinking about that because I was trying to think about how to be really subtle about, does she still have some left? Does she need some more? And, figuring out for holiday gifts. But I will testify that ShealoGlo is great for stocking stuffers or under the tree if you are giving gifts this year. Well, my friend, I have
Thank you so
so
much.
enjoyed this conversation with you today and our guest,
Yes,
and
me
I
too.
look forward to more. Next week, we're on the eve of the American holiday where we're giving gratitude and
Yes,
taking some time with our
yes,
families, and I look forward to talking to you.
yes, me too. And thank you so much for our listeners and everybody that's been downloading. We will be here next week, live at 5. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you next week.